What's up, you sick mother bluffers? In this one, I'm playing a tournament at Deuce's. It's been way too long since I cashed, and even longer since I won, and I intend to change that tonight. Let's go. In this one, we're at the 200-400 level. There's a limp from under the gun. I look down at pocket jacks in under the gun 1. I raise to 1500. I get called by the hijack and the button. Before the small blind, 3 bets to 6700. The under the gun limp folds, and action is back on me. It's never a good feeling to get 3-bet when you're holding pocket jacks, as against most players, you're going to find yourself crushed by an overpair or flipping versus ace-king, ace-queen, but I know this particular player can sometimes 3-bet a little wide. I started the hand with just under 8,000, so I know that I have 0 fold equity. I just have to decide if I want to play for my entire stack right there and then. The answer is yes. I 4-bet for 7,800. The hijack and button players who call my initial raise are going to get out of the way. Small blind obviously calls, and I'm up against pocket 10s. Amazing. Really the best scenario I could have hoped for. Not only that, but I've got both their suits covered, so I will not lose to a flush. I just need to dodge 2 10s. We're going heads up to a run out, which comes 3 queen 4, turn is a 4, and the river is a 6. I get a full double up. Perfect start to the tournament. At the 300-600 level, there's a limp from the cutoff and small blind before I look down at 9-3 suited in the big blind. I check my option, so we go 3 ways to a flop of 7-10-4 with 2 diamonds. Small blind checks. I should probably go for a semi bluff with 9 high, but I end up checking to the cutoff, who bets 1,000. Small blind folds, and I make the call. Heads up to the turn, which comes the 6 of diamonds. Once again, I would prefer betting here, as my opponent could be a non-believer and stick around with a 10. Instead, I check, but thankfully, the cutoff is going to do the betting for me and fire a second bullet of 2,000. If I'm putting my opponent on a 10, I should probably go for a check raise here, both for value and protection in case they're holding a bigger diamond and river a bigger flush, but I end up just making the call. The river is a safe-looking queen of clubs. I may not be able to get any more value from a 10 now, unless they've got queen 10 of course, but I can't let this go check either. I bet 4,200, my opponent takes one last look at their cards and folds. Not too happy with the way I played this one, definitely a spot where I will be going for a check raise on the turn in the future. A couple of hands later, there's a limp from the hijack before I look down at ace-6 suited from the button. I mix in an over limp, the small blind calls, and the big blind completes. We're going 4 ways to a flop of 10-10 ace rainbow. Action checks to the hijack limper who snap bets 3,000. I know this opponent has a tendency to try and take pots down when checked to. I'm not buying what they're selling, so I make the call. Small blind and big blind fold. Heads up to the turn, which comes the queen of hearts. Hijack slows down and checks, which, unless they're setting a trap, would indicate that I have the best hand. I'm not going to check this one back, but I don't want to overcommit either. So I bet 3,500 and the hijack folds. Soon after, this hand happens where the short stack under gun 1 player jams for 4,500 and I look down at pocket 8s. I have a bit of a decision here between just calling or isolating. We're playing 10-handed and with a ton of players left to act behind, I would hate to 3-bet and either get called and play a bloated pot out of position or get jammed on and maybe have to fold. For that reason, I decide to just call. Action folds to the hijack who goes in the tank for over a minute and a half, and he does 3-bet jam, but fortunately it's only for just over 7,000. Action folds back to me and I have a mandatory call. Headed to showdown, the first all-in player shows pocket 4s and the hijack shows jack 10 suited. I have one player crushed and I'm flipping against the other. Can I hold? Let's go to the run out. The flop comes 5-7 deuce rainbow, turn is a king, and the river is an 8. I had the best hand all along, but I river a set for good measure. Running good early in this tournament and loving it, let's keep it going. After a very active 30 minutes or so, things quiet down a little bit. We rejoin the action a half hour later or so. We're at the 500 1k level and there's an open from under the gun 1 to 3,500, which the middle position player calls, before I look down at pocket 10s in the small blind. Sitting on about 40 bigs, I once again debate between 3-betting and flatting. Being out of position, I think a 3-bet is preferable, especially with the middle position player flatting the open. but against an under the gun 1 open, I have to give them credit for a hand that will either call or 4-bet me, so I decide to just call and set mine. This gives the big blind a good price to see a flop, so they come in as well. So we go 4 ways to a flop of ace 7-9 rainbow. I'm going to start things off with a check, and surprisingly, action checks around. When the turn comes a brick looking 3 of spades, and with action on the flop checking around, there's a good chance I have the best hand, but I should probably deny equity from flush draws or 1-pair type hands, so I decide to lead for 8,500. The big blind goes into the tank, and they're the only player I'm slightly worried about at this point, as they could have checked and flowed to the original raiser with ace X, or maybe a set of 7s or 9s, but they end up making the fold, and now it's the original raiser who goes well into the tank. They look like they're in a really tough spot. After about 45 seconds, they end up shoving for 12,000. Middle position player folds, and even though I'm pretty sure I'm behind, I have to make the call for 3,500 more. I wish I had paid more attention to their stack. Anyway, I make the call, and under gun 1 shows 2 red kings. We're going heads up to the river, which comes the 6 of spades, and they're going to take this one down. Props to my opponent for finding the call. I mean, technically a shove, but you get what I'm saying. On to the next one. What's worse than losing half your stack? Losing half your stack and the blinds double. That's right, we're now at the 1k 2k level, and with about 12 bigs in my stack, I look down at ace king offsuit from under the gun. Definitely a spot where I could easily shove with the turbo structure of this tournament, but I opt for a raise to 4,500. The hijack is the only player to make the call, so we go heads up to a flop of jack 4-10 2 spades. I feel like this flop does smash the hijack's calling range, but they also have a bunch of under pairs I can get to fold here, plus I have 2 overs, a gut shot straight draw, and a backdoor second nut flush draw, so plenty of ways to make the best hand on the turn or river. I see bet small for 4,500, and the hijack folds. A couple of hands later, there's a limp from the cutoff before I look down at queen jack suited on the button. Sitting on 15 bigs, I once again mix in an over limp. Small blind calls, and the big blind completes, so we go 4 ways to a flop of 9-4-4, on which action checks around. The turn comes the deuce of hearts, giving me a flush draw to go along with my 2 overs. This time, the small blind leads for 4,500, and I'm the only player to make the call. The river does not improve me. It comes to 7 of spades, and now the small blind slows down and checks. Here's what's going through my head at this point in the hand. There's a slight chance my queen high could be good if my opponent missed a weaker flush draw or straight draw with like 3-5 and they're now giving up, so I might win by simply checking back. That being said, if I bet, they'll fold those missed draws, but maybe also hands I lose to like pocket 8s, 6s or 5s, or maybe even ace X or king X of hearts. I might be able to get them to fold a 9, but not unless I throw out a big bet. Thing is, there's 17k in the pot, and I'm sitting on 23k, so if I bet and get called, I'd be left with almost nothing. At this point, I think that leaves me 2 options. Go all in, or give up. My next line of thinking is, what am I representing that beats a 9 or even under pairs if I jam? I limped pre-flop, so I probably don't have pocket 10s or better. Maybe I turned a boat with pocket deuces and slow played, or floated the turn with pocket 7s and rivered a boat. The more I think about it, the more I think jamming is going to look super suspicious, and my opponent could find a hero call with a 9, so I'm now ruling that option out. But I can't quite bring myself to give up. This is a decent sized pot, and I think I have to at least try and take it down. In the end, I decide to pick a sizing which will not cripple me if I get called, 7,500, which sends the small blind into a minute-long tank. They let me know they have a 9, which I don't love to hear. They're talking through the hand. They say they put me on either pocket 8s or pocket 10s. The small blind is a super nice guy called Ryan with whom I really enjoy playing, and even though there's a reasoning behind it, I hate my bluff sizing so much, I'm almost rooting for him to make the call. But I'm surprised to see him fold. Very mixed feelings as the chips are being pushed my way. I hate the play on the river, but it gets the job done, and I'm obviously happy to pick up a decent sized pot. We're now at the 1.53k level. Action folds to me and I look down at pocket 9s from the low jack. I open to 6,000. The button makes the call before the big blind shoves for 7,500. Both myself and the button call the jam, so we go 3 ways to the flop, which comes 4-4-6 rainbow. Beautiful flop for 9s. I continue for 7,500 and the button makes the call. Heads up for the side pot to the turn, which comes the Queen of Hearts. It does put an overcard to my pair, which might have slowed me down in the past, but then I think about my opponent's possible holdings, and I realize this Queen doesn't change much. I don't think my opponent floated with a hand like Ace Queen, King Queen, or Queen Jack when there was no side pot to play for. I don't think they have 10s or better, as those hands would have 3-bet shove pre-flop. I don't think there's many hands containing a 6 or a 4 that would have called my open, so I think that leaves 2 possible hands. My opponent will check back if I check, but might call if I jam. Pocket 7s and pocket 8s. They're the same player that tank shoved kings when I had the 10s on the ace-high board, and this is pretty much the exact same spot, except I have the better hand this time. So, after a little bit, I shove for 25,000, and my opponent goes into the tank for about a minute and a half, and their body language tells me I'm pretty spot on when it comes to their hand. They finally shrug and make the call, and they show pocket 7s. The big blind shows 6-5 suited, so I need to dodge a 6, but more importantly a 7, and the river comes the Jack of Clubs. I take down a massive pot. Really happy I took the time to think through this hand to find some extra value. Moving on to the 2K, 4K level, and this one there's a limp from under the gun. I took down an ace jack from the cutoff, raised to 12,000, and everybody folds. A couple of hands later, the under the gun player shoves for just over a big blind. Action somehow folds to me in the big blind, and I look down at Jack Deuce offsuit. I make the call, and I'm up against 10-7. We go heads up to a run out, and there's a jack right in the window. Flop comes 5-8 jack, 2 hearts. My opponent can still win with a 9 for the straight. Turn comes a king, and the river comes a 6, and I bust the under the gun player. Good game. And with this, we now move to the final table, where I will be coming in as one of the chip leaders, with most players sitting on stacks of 10 big blinds or less. Early on at the final table, action folds to me in middle position when I look down at ace queen suited. I open to 8,000. Action folds to the big blind, who 3-bet shoves for just over 11,000. I make the call, and they show pocket aces. We're going heads up to a run out, which comes deuce 8-7 with 1 heart. Turn is the king of diamonds. I cannot win this hand. River is the 5 of hearts, and the big blind is going to take this one down. At the 3K, 6K level, I pick up ace king and under the gun. I open to 12,000. Action folds to the short stack big blind, who calls for 9,000 total, and they show king 10 of diamonds. We're going heads up to a run out, which comes 5 king 8. Turn is a deuce, and the river is the case king. My opponent makes trips, but unfortunately they're outkicked and they're out. A couple of hands later, action folds to me in the small blind. I look down at king queen. I raise enough to put the big blind all in, and they fold. The very next hand, I pick up king queen again on the button. I raise enough to put the blinds all in, and they both fold. Smooth sailing so far, getting dealt good starting hands, and accumulating chips. Taking a quick look at the payouts, 4 players are getting paid, with 466 going to first place. Not too bad for a $40 buy-in. This is about an average price pool for this tournament. First will sometimes go over 500, 600, even 700 bucks. So if you'd like to play a $40 buy-in tournament for a chance at making 10x your buy-in or more in a little under 5 hours, make sure to check out the link to the Facebook group in the description. I'm there most Fridays, so come hang out with me and the other players at Deuce's. I guarantee you'll have a good time. Moving on to the 5K, 10K level, I pick up ace king in middle position. I open to 20,000 and everybody folds. With many players starting this final table with stacks of 10 bigs or less, bust outs have been happening pretty quickly, and with 5 players left and 4 getting paid, we decide to take 10 bucks out of each paid spot to pay the bubble 40 bucks, which means we are now in the money. Nice to finally cash after a long dry spell. I'm not gonna settle for a min cash though. I have my eyes set on first place. Let's go. In this one, action folds to me in the small blind, and I look down at 9-6 suited. We're 5-handed, and the player to my right is very short stacked, so there is a pay jump to consider. I decide to complete and see what the big blind does. They check their option, so we go heads up to a flop of ace 3-10 rainbow, on which we both check. The turn comes the 9 of clubs, pairing up my 9 and opening a ton of straight and flush draws. I decide to get thin value from said draws and protect my hand against king x, queen x, jack x type hands, and bet 10,000. The big blind doesn't waste too much time before shoving for 53,000 total. As I mentioned, there are a ton of draws on this board, and this player is definitely capable of shoving with them. Thinking of the hands that beat me, my opponent shouldn't be holding too many of them. They don't have a set or top pair, as they would have shoved a pocket pair or ace-x pre-flop. I think they would have bet a 10 on the flop after I checked. So the only hand I can put my opponent on is a straight or a flush draw, sometimes a 9 with possibly a better kicker. This is a bit of a tricky spot because if I fold, I still have the chip lead. If I call and I'm wrong, I risk going from chip leader to shortest stack. If I call and I'm right and I hold, I'll have a massive chip lead and possibly cruise to a win. I end up tanking for about 2.5 minutes. Shout out to my table mates for their patience. Before deciding there's too many hands I'm ahead of and making the call. To my surprise, the big blind shows Jack 10 of hearts and they have me crushed. I'm completely gutted and I'm going to need a miracle to win this one. I need another 9 or a 6. Damn. Shout out to Aaron who watches the vlogs. He got me to put my chips in behind, only for me to find a miracle suck out on the river. Instead of taking over the chip lead, he's out in 4th. Like I always say in these spots, I'm not sorry, but I empathize. Good game, Aaron. The very next hand, the button folds and I look down at ace-5 in the small blind. I raise enough to put the big blind all in, and they make the fold. At this point in the tournament, we agree that we are also short, that this is turning into a shove or fold fest, and ultimately it will come down to who's the luckiest. So we discuss a chop. I'm the chip leader with about double the chip stack of the second place player. We agree on taking 20 bucks out of first and second place to give an extra 40 to third place. And with that, I win the tournament by way of having the most chips, booking a win of 436 bucks, taking my buy-in out and a 10% tip. This brings my net result to a profit of 356 bucks. Nice to finally book a win. Thanks for watching. Good luck at the tables, and I'll catch you in the next one.